Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 647 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our 9th book just came out. It's called From Letters to Leaders, The Legacy of Service. So go and pick up that book on Amazon today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring sorority and fraternity leaders together. So, fun fact, I am so grateful for the many sorority and fraternity volunteers all over the country. The reality is these folks just truly want to give back to their organization that was so helpful to them as a collegiate, and they don't even get paid for their work. It's truly a labor of love, and we need as many mentors as possible to do this work and ensure that each chapter has the expertise and the resources that they need in order to be successful. So, thank you to all of the volunteers who are listening to our podcast today. And speaking of volunteers, let's talk to our next guest. Dr. Tina Tran brings more than 20 years of experience in veterinary practice, education, and leadership. Her career includes work in small animal private practice, shelter medicine, and academic leadership roles at Portland Community College, Purdue University College of Veterinary Medicine, and the University of Arizona College of Veterinary Medicine, where she served as founding faculty and clinical relations lead veterinarian. Most recently, Tina is the founding dean of the proposed veterinary school at Hanover College in Indiana. And Tina is widely recognized for her contributions to veterinary education and her commitment to creating learning environments where all students feel supported and empowered to succeed. Outside of work, Tina likes cooking, traveling, and taking care of her many houseplants. Welcome to the show, Tina.
Hello. I'm not sure why you got that last part because I don't like to cook. I like to eat, but that's okay.
Hey, listen, I like to eat too. And recently I've been getting into cooking. And I have to tell you, it is so much fun. I've been having a blast. And my kids are like, wow, Dad, your cooking skills have greatly improved. So that's the good news. I'm getting better at
it. Yeah. It's a journey, right?
It's a journey. It's totally a journey. So I want to talk about your undergraduate experience because obviously this was a very formative part of your life, your career, et cetera. You chose UC Davis for your undergraduate experience, and I'm sure you could have gone to a whole bunch of different schools. Why did you decide that UC Davis was the right place for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for a little bit of context, I grew up in Illinois, and I knew from a fairly young age that I wanted to be a veterinarian, partly because we had owned a lot of dogs growing up, and I had access to some veterinarians in my extended family. And so I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian, and this was, of course, because I'm that old, it was before the internet was a thing. So I knew where the most geographically close veterinary schools were. And so I thought I guess my thought process was, I know I want to go to vet school, which happens after you get your undergrad degree in most cases. So I want to go to undergrad where they have a vet school, right? So then I'll have access to, animal experiences, veterinary experiences. I can be already on a campus that I'll probably go to for vet school. So I got into a few different ones, from Illinois. So the closest ones that I applied to and was accepted to was Michigan State, Purdue University in Indiana, and University of Illinois. And somewhat on a whim, also because if I think back to it, I was a little bit of, I wouldn't say a wild child, but I was a little bit angry, I guess, back then. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go as far away as possible. So that I can kind of give myself some space. I also was very interested in not starting over necessarily, but going to a school where I wouldn't necessarily know anybody from high school. And I thought that would be great in terms of finding new friendships and those types of things. So then I also applied to UC Davis, which is in Northern California, which also has a veterinary school. And thankfully was accepted, and then fell in love with the campus when I went for a campus visit during my senior year. Found out at that time that UC Davis is actually not on the beach. It's in the Central Valley, but I still loved it. I mean, my heart truly is at UC Davis, and so I really enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, it really is a beautiful campus. It might not be like Long Beach and some of these other campuses that are literally right on the beach where students fall out of their
Yes, like Santa
window.
Barbara is like that.
Yeah,
UC
yeah,
Santa Barbara
Santa
is
Barbara, right?
exactly
Like
like
you
that.
fall out of the house, you land in sand. I mean,
Yes.
it's a wild place. But UC Davis is great too, and it obviously worked out. So there
Yeah.
you go. I mean,
Yep.
and you actually joined Kappa Alpha Theta there. So I was wondering what was special about the women in this particular sorority that made you want to join them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had to think about it because it's been so long. But what I realized, a couple things came into play. One, I did not join or have an interest in joining a sorority until my second year of undergrad. And most of that was because I came in contact with people that were in the Greek system. I mean, at UC Davis, there is a fairly robust Greek system, but it's not as robust as you'd say, see in some of the East Coast schools or in the Midwest, and other larger institutions. And so, really, part of my interest in Kappa Alpha Theta specifically came from the fact that I knew several of the women that were already in that sorority in other aspects, right? I knew one who was a summer orientation leader, and I was planning to be a summer orientation leader for UC Davis. And then I knew several others from another Greek organization that I was a part of. And so I kind of knew them outside the context of Kappa Alpha Theta. And then when I realized that they were all in the same sorority, it just kind of worked out. And the other thing that I think is important in terms of why I found myself where I found myself is that one, I already knew people from that sorority, and then two, I went through what they at the time termed informal recruitment or informal rush. So I did not go through the whole formal, 5, 7 day long thing that happens, in usually like a fall term for most schools. And so I think because it was that informal, kind of very casual conversation, much more relaxed environment, that's I think what really drew me in. And then what I realized as I was starting to talk to these women during recruitment is that many of them had interest in medical fields. And so even in my own, new member class, or what some people call pledge class, there were of the 10 or 12 of us, there were probably at least 4 or 5 of us that were pre-veterinary. And so kind of knowing that I had people within my cohort that were interested in the same career as me, um, it was actually we kind of built our own community, essentially a community within a community. So that was a lot of the reason that I decided to join Kappa Alpha Theta specifically.
I love it. And obviously, the relationships mattered. You cared about these particular women. So that's really important to note. And, she saw people on campus, women who were leading in various organizations across campus, not just Kappa Alpha Theta. They were involved in all these other organizations. So that's a really good hint. These are two things you got to focus on is the relationship and be involved on campus. When you have those two pieces, students are going to automatically gravitate to you, just like Tina did to Kappa Alpha Theta. And you bring up your new member class and the other women that also wanted to go to veterinary school. So I'm wondering, how did your experience in Kappa Alpha Theta help prepare you for those realities of veterinary school and taking on leadership roles?
Uh, I would say that being in Kappa Alpha Theta helps me with not just life skills, kind of being resilient, working through conflict, interpersonal communications, but also it helped in kind of career building. Uh, I didn't know it at the time, but it taught me a lot around project management. So while I was there, I was the rush chair, now the recruitment chair. And so I think back and I think, oh my gosh, yeah, I was in charge of a lot of things, a lot of coordinating, a lot of delegating, a lot of keeping people accountable, a lot of record keeping, some finance. And so it taught me a lot about project management. And the other thing I also love to mention is that I also learned the art of bumping. Are you familiar with bumping?
I am.
Okay. Should I talk about it for those that might
Yeah,
not?
talk about it as if I didn't know.
Okay. Okay. So bumping, at least the way I remember it from my recruitment days, is essentially, as a current member of of a sorority, is that when recruitment happens, oftentimes you are having conversation with people that are interested in your sorority, right? And so what happens is it's a very coordinated thing that happens where you have one individual who is specifically supposed to go talk to a potential new member, And that individual already knows some things because they've done their homework about what's, where their hometown is, maybe what their major is, what year they are, etc. Like they know a little bit of information that was provided to them through the recruitment process. And then they are very specifically going to have another person from that house come and bump them in the midst of their conversation, because part of the goal in recruitment is for as many women in that house to meet all the potential new members so that they can provide some insight into, if they're a good fit, any additional information that might connect them back to the sorority. And so part of the bump is you have to very quickly introduce the new person that's coming into the conversation and then connect them very quickly to one another so that they have a point of conversation, and then very quickly see yourself out of that conversation because you have to get bumped out, right? And I think when I think about bumping, really most of it is focused on the art of small talk, which I think is very important when you're trying to network and connect with people, whether it's just in a social setting or in a career setting. And it's one of the things that I really pride myself on, is the ability to use that skill that I learned so long ago in my current environment. So whether it's veterinary education, in a clinic exam room type of thing, is that I oftentimes have to bump because I have maybe a veterinary technician that's going to come in and help me, right? And then I leave the room. So there's lots of scenarios where bumping is actually very important.
I 100% agree. Certainly, you see it all the time in a doctor's office. But also, I mean, just that, in talking and networking with business owners and things like that, you have what's called the elevator pitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're basically talking within 1 minute. Where did that come from? Basically, if you walked into an elevator with the CEO on the ground floor and you were both going to the 10th floor, you have about a minute to get your spiel out, whatever that is, who you are and what you do and how you could potentially work together. So I think the bumping, that really does kind of prepare you for that elevator pitch that you might need to make to a CEO in a very rushed environment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and part of it is, how do you make yourself stand out, right? So that it's a memorable conversation. And I think a lot of that comes from that finding that connection, right? Like, did you come from the same hometown? Did you go to the same institution? Are you from the same Greek organization? You know, um, do you have another interest outside of your career that might be an interest to them? Like, are you both big White Sox fans or something like that, right? So, but yeah, the elevator pitch, I think, is also a great way to kind of make yourself stand out a little bit, to say, like, okay, what's the thing that I'm going to remember from you when I step out of this elevator, right? Yeah.
100%, 100%. And you're very successful in terms of your career as the
Oh,
executive
thank you.
associate dean. You're a successful veterinarian. But I think the students who are listening right now, the undergraduates, I think that there is some misconception. They feel like you have to choose between Greek life and a demanding career like medicine. And
Hmm.
you obviously have done it successfully. And I think there are many like you who have done it. So where do you think that misconception comes from?
I think I thought about this, and I think a lot of times what I hear from people is this very binary thinking of either or. I'm either going to be in the Greek system, or I'm going to focus on my academics. And what I've been kind of thinking a lot about is that I feel like I'm in my both and era, and I have been for a while. And not, both and, not in the sense that you do everything, but that you shouldn't necessarily have to choose if you are strategic about it, and if you know what your North Star is in terms of what you ultimately want to do. And I would argue that being in a Greek organization has helped me significantly, not only with, building some of those life skills and those career building skills, but also in terms of the connections and the network that is provided to you, finding mentorship, being mentors for other. I mean, all of those things you can find in a Greek organization. And I also think there's some myths that continue to be very pervasive Greek organizations. Like when I think about, because they are social organizations for the most part. So then people think all they do is socialize, they party, and there's no focus on academics. When in fact, many of the Greek organizations that I do in fact have a significant amount of emphasis on academics, right? So whether they have study groups or they have requirements in terms of GPAs, all of those things are very much a part of what I know of Kappa Alpha Theta specifically. And then there's also the part where they think, I think individuals that are not so interested in Greek life think that it distracts from your studies. And I think that's, we can talk about that a little bit more, but there's the time management piece that comes. And I think for a lot of people, the busier you are, the more you learn to time manage versus if you have only one thing on your plate, then, you can spend all your time doing that one thing, which is not reality for most people. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And your answer sounds an awful lot like a lot of the other successful fraternity and sorority members that I know. I'm thinking of the governor of Arkansas as an example. He was talking about how important Greek life was for him. He was actually the son of a single mom, and he didn't really have time management skills. And he really credited the fraternity for allowing him to develop those skills on the fly, which then enabled him to one day become governor. You obviously, to be governor of a state, you need to have time management skills. You must. Otherwise, you're going to fail. And he really credits the fraternity for allowing him to do that.
Mhm.
So I love it. And also, I would love to see sororities and fraternities really just highlight some of their sisters and their brothers that really are executing at a high level academically. Like, let's just show all the 4.0 GPAs within Kappa Alpha Theta and the ones who are pre-med. And let's really focus on that to shift those stereotypes to say that, yes, we are social organizations, but academics are actually part of our values that we commit to when we join Kappa Alpha Theta. So,
Yeah.
we're losing some of those other pieces.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think one of the things I love that I've seen lately is, kind of a broadening out or a widening of what people consider excelling in scholarship or academics. So not necessarily always the 4.0s, which I think are important, but also recognizing when people have made significant improvements in their GPA or when people have found some level of success in their chosen career field. Maybe they secured an internship. Like I think those things are worth celebrating too, because people need to recognize that scholarship and excellence in scholarship is more than just a number. Um,
100%.
so I'm
100%.
really loving that I'm seeing kind of that broadening out of what counts
Yeah.
as excellence in scholarship.
100%. I mean, listen, your first job is going to be concerned with your GPA, but then after that, it's going to be what have you done? And
Yes,
so
exactly.
for sure. And also I agree that a lot of students are looking at internships and job placement and saying, hey, I want a job there. I want an internship there. So if we advertise those things, I think more people are going to want to join because of that network that Kappa
Hmm.
Alpha Theta provides. And there's also a lot of first generation students on college campuses today, much more so, I think, than when we were in college as undergrads. So, as a first generation Filipino-American student, talk to us about the pressures or the expectations that you felt growing up and in college.
Yeah, I hope nobody's going to do the math on this. So I grew up in the 80s, and so when I went to college, it was the early 90s. And growing up as Filipino American, and my parents both immigrated as adults separately from the Philippines to the Chicagoland area. One of the things that I don't know that there was ever any uh, intentional purposeful way that they were trying to do this. But I guess back then it was more common to kind of assimilate into American culture if you were seen as an immigrant or, somebody that racially or ethnically was different. So this idea of blending in to the American culture was a very pervasive part of my upbringing. And I think it was, like I said, I don't think it was intentional. But I did notice little, like as I think back about it, my parents did not speak anything but English when they left the house. But then within the house, they would speak Tagalog, which is the primary dialect of the Filipino language. So as somebody who is Filipino, I actually don't speak Tagalog. I understand it really well. I can translate it very quickly into my head. Into English, but then everything I respond in is English because I don't know how to translate it back conversational Tagalog. So there was a lot of that kind of blending in. I think a lot about the model minority myth that happens, this idea that Asian Americans have to be perfect in every situation, that they are often taught or often seen as individuals that don't kind of stir up the pot. that don't cause controversy, that try to kind of keep the peace. And I think within the medical professions, oftentimes there's this real pressure to be perfect. And perfectionism and imposter phenomenon are oftentimes exacerbated in an Asian household. And so that pressure was real for me. I don't think it really came to a head until I became a veterinarian. And then I realized that perfectionism, while it may have helped to some degree because there are some beneficial parts of perfectionism, there's certainly some very maladaptive parts of perfectionism that can actually keep people from realizing their full potential, right? Because then it keeps you from trying things where you might not be great at it, that you might struggle with, and that you will likely make mistakes with. And so, I think a lot about that in terms of, um, you overlay that perfectionism with a career path that there's some really high stakes in terms of lives being, literally in your hands at times.
Mm.
And then also being Asian American, right? Like all of those things make it really challenging to do the work ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about support animals. I ran into somebody at a conference that had a support animal, so we started talking about his dog and other things. There's also pet therapy that is out there as well, and I know that's something that you have a lot of experience with. What have animals taught you about leadership and about empathy?
Yeah, so I'll take a little twist on that, and I want to focus a little bit on the human animal bond,
Yeah.
because it is very integral to veterinary medicine. And one of the things that I have learned over time, like when we used to have our dog Marley, and he and I were a pet therapy team, and we would go to assisted living places, we would go to elementary schools, and we would work together. And what I realized is that while my large focus in veterinary medicine is on the animal part, that humans are always in that equation of the human animal bond. And what I saw for myself as we were a pet therapy team is how much having an animal physically in the space connected not only that person to an animal, because a lot of times they didn't know my dog Marley, but all of a sudden they were much more open to conversation because I have a dog, and maybe they would talk about their pet at home or how they always wanted a pet at home, and so they would open up. And then the other thing I noticed a lot, especially in the elementary school settings that we would go to, where we would oftentimes be kind of put with smaller groups of children, is that oftentimes the children would find connection with each other because there was an animal there. And one of the things that still kind of gives me goosebumps is I had a small group of kids that were with me, and they ended up talking to each other, right? As Marley and I were sitting there. And then so, after a half an hour with that classroom, the teacher saw me to the door, and she said, and she was almost in tears, which almost made me, start crying too. But she said, I she's like, I observed those two kids talking to each other, and she said, Tina, I will tell you, that one boy has never said anything in this classroom unless he's called on, you know. And then those two boys together have never talked to one another. And it was only when they saw Marley that they realized, like, they both have pets in their families. And so now they have something in common, right? And so like that was just like, wow, that that moment I was just like, wow, this human animal bond is a really deep, powerful thing that I have the great fortune of being, kind of front and center in that conversation. And but wow, like just the power that it has, because I see it in every space. I mean, we can't even walk our dog without somebody engaging us in conversation, right? So yeah, it's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, really good stuff. Now, there are a lot of students listening that want to go to med school. Perhaps they want to be a veterinarian, who knows? So, what should college students be doing right now if they know that they want a career in medicine in the future?
Yeah, that's great. So regardless of what part of the human healthcare industry you want to join, I think first and foremost is a focus on academics. I'm most familiar with vet school admissions, and what I will tell you is that if you don't have the grades, or in some cases, if there's a standardized test involved, if you don't hit those two marks pretty high, then that's usually the first pass during admissions. So definitely work on the academics, and then kind of part part and parcel to that is, what we talked about before in terms of time management, creating good study habits. One of the things I think is really important is to recognize early when you need help and to normalize that, the asking for help. And so whether that's academic, whether that's you need accommodations, you need tutoring. I think in terms of your mental health and well-being, maybe you need some counseling. You need somebody that's just going to have the ability to listen to what you're going through because you are in fact a whole person. You're not just your GPA. And so somebody, being able to seek out counseling, which a lot of institutions have a lot of access for students to help them with their mental health. I think those are really important things because professional school is no joke. It's hard. It's hard and it doesn't stop. And so the sooner you can recognize that you need help and to get help is fantastic. And the one thing I thought about afterwards too, when I was going through these questions is I also think that being in a Greek organization, like the people skills is important to work on because like we talked about before, a lot of what you do, even in veterinary medicine, is talking to people. So this idea that a lot of people have around vet med being a profession where if you don't like people, but you love animals, that you should become a veterinarian. I will tell you right now, that's not a good idea because I talk to people all the time. And you don't have to necessarily love people, but you also have to recognize that talking with people and interacting with people is a very big part of veterinary medicine as well. So I think working on those people skills is always great. And one of the things that specifically for veterinary school is a myth is that all your experience in undergrad has to be either employed or volunteer work in an animal setting or a veterinary setting. But the reality is, I mean, if I see that somebody has been a barista at a coffee shop or has worked in the school bookstore or has done anything where they're interfacing with the general public, they probably know a lot that will be transferable to veterinary medicine in terms of their people skills. So don't limit yourself to just those animal experiences.
Those are great points, and I agree with all of them. Really good stuff. Now, I love good food here, and I do get to Phoenix quite often when I visit my mom who lives in Prescott Valley. So I'm wondering, where should I go for a great meal the next time I'm in Phoenix?
That You know what? I'm also foodie because I told you earlier, I like to eat, I don't like to cook. So there's a lot of really great Asian places throughout the Phoenix metropolitan area. And so a couple of my favorites, there's a place called Chow's Kitchen, which they're really well known for their soup dumplings in Chandler, Arizona, which is where I live. There's a couple of big kind of Asian plazas in Mesa. I think of Mekong Plaza. They have some really good bao. They have some really good Vietnamese food. I don't remember the names of the places off the top of my head, so you just kind of have to wander around. Mana Barbecue is really good Korean barbecue in Mesa. And then probably one of our favorite things to do with our high school senior right now, because she's a big Japanese cuisine person, is we will go to the local H Mart, which is also in Mesa. And it's essentially like a big Asian grocery store. And we'll get cuts of sushi and then we'll bring it home and then she'll make us like legitimate sushi rice. And we have our own much cheaper, but really high quality sushi at home. So yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Next time I'm in town, I'll go shopping. I'll do the food shopping and I'll cook for you. It's
Okay,
totally
that sounds good.
fine. All right. So if our listeners, if they want to reach out to you for public speaking on their college campus, maybe some workshop facilitation, where should they go in order to connect with you?
Yeah, that's great. So probably the easiest way to find me is through LinkedIn. And even though I go by Tina Tran, actually you have to search for like Christina Villaret, which is my middle name, Villarete, Tran, Tran. So that's the best way to connect with me.
Fantastic. Go and find her on LinkedIn, connect, and she's super easy to work with and super fun. So I
Oh,
think
thank
she
you.
would do a fantastic job on any college campus working with college students. So thank you so much for being here, and just thank you for all the volunteer work that you do. Thank you for just being a real big proponent of the Greek system and showing our college students that you can do both. You
Yes,
can excel in your fraternity or sorority
both
and also
and.
go into the field of medicine. This is an
Yes,
and situation. It
yep,
doesn't have to be an or. So thank you
yes.
for that.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation with Tina Tran, I want you to share this episode with your chapter. Drop a link in a group chat for your chapter or just share it on social media. You never really know who needs to hear this message today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.